So we're up to one of the final stages of the build, which is cladding, which is also very exciting.
I'm definitely glad that we're up to this part of the build.
Couldn't go one sentence without a pun. I'm glad some people enjoy it, because we've had comments. It's like, oh, I love Julie's puns. I'm like, glad you do.
Glad you do. We're also going to be doing the downlights and putting in the switches for all of our utilities as well. For cladding, we're using this pine shiplap. It's 113mm by 13mm. Has quite a few different names, tongue and groove, VJ board. It is lightweight pine, but it's probably not the most lightweight thing that you could use for cladding, but we're doing it more for the aesthetic that we want. We're going to start with the ceiling. We've got to put up our final layer of insulation as we do that, and then we're going to move on to the walls and the rest of it. These are the downlights we're using. They're 3-watt, 12-volt warm white downlights, and they're really quite slimline as well. So we're going to drill the holes in the cladding before we put those up for where they're going. Something that's been really handy around some of these vents and things like that is having a little piece of scrap like this. So you can position it in there, work out where that cowl will sit, slide that in where the next board would come in, and then you know that's where your next board's going to finish, and then you can measure the next piece from that rather than trying to hold a whole piece up there. For the cladding on the ceiling, we didn't want to lose any extra headroom by putting in battens or ribs above it, so we're screwing directly into the metal ribs, and for that we're using these 30mm self-tapping metal screws. So they've also got a countersunk head, so they are countersinking themselves, which means we can then put some wood filler over that and sand it back and get a nice finish. So often with a shiplap board like this, you would screw it or nail it through the tongue part of the board, so the thin part. I'm a little bit worried about that splitting off, and I just want to get the full depth of the screw holding through the main part of the board, so that's why we're screwing through the main board and not through the tongue.
So I'm just using this poly filler putty to fill in all the screw holes, and I mean, we don't really have a proper tool to do this. I've been kind of using various tools, but the thing that seems to be working well for me for now is kind of getting a tiny bit, rolling it into a little ball, and then just like squishing it in and out, and then if I need to, I can go back in with kind of like anything with a flat edge to get away any excess, but just trying to use as little as possible so that I don't have to sand for days. But we do have this Ryobi sander, which makes things a lot easier.
So we finished off cladding the ceiling, as you saw, and we're now moving on to the walls. Some of the very edge bits and some of the bits on the walls as well are very fiddly, a lot of like cutting stuff with the jigsaw, trying to get it exactly right in and out 5 to 10 times sometimes per board, trying to get it around certain bits, particularly around the front there. But now with the walls, we're onto a little bit of an easier run. We're going into our ply ribs or battens. So these are 12mm strips of ply that we put in, and we're now screwing the cladding down with some 25mm timber screws. So this is 13mm and that's 12mm, so we're getting full depth with the screw, but it's not punching out the back. At the moment we're cutting out the inserts for all the utility controls that are going in the kitchen. So just been measuring up the backs of these and then cutting them out with the multi-tool and the jigsaw so they fit in there nicely like that. At the moment I'm wiring in the utility switches. So we've run all the cable up to this panel in the kitchen, and I've drilled out the holes for the switches. So we've just got these 2-pin rocker switches, so they're just an on-off switch, and I've just drilled out a 25mm hole. So I've run the cable to the utilities as a loop. So for example, this is for the water pump. So it comes in as a loop and then it's just looped. There's one that I haven't done yet. There's just a loop of cable there and then it loops back to where it needs to go. So it comes from the battery, comes out as a loop here, and then it goes to where it needs to go. So with these 2-pin switches, it's pretty simple to wire them. They tell you on the back how to wire them. So you've got the power, so that's the source coming in from the battery. And then you've got the connection to accessory, it's labeled here. So that'll go to the utility, so to the water pump, for example. And that's running the positive. So all I'm doing here is pulling the sheath off that. I'm leaving the earth runs through, and I might throw a little diagram up here of how I'm wiring it, but the earth continues through, and then I've just cut the positive, and then on the positive I've just crimped some of these little female blade terminals. So some important things to note is just keeping tabs on which side is coming from the battery, so you know which side to wire the battery and which side to wire accessory. But other than that, it's pretty simple. They'll just connect in. So if you look at that, power, so I've labeled there for that one the battery, so that would go on there, and then the other side goes on there, and then that would just pop into there like that. Something else to note with these switches is just make sure you're getting a switch that's rated for what you're doing. So these are 12-volt DC switches and they're rated for 25 amps, so they're fine for the sort of loads that are running through them. So I've just pulled that off. You can just cut the positive. That's the line for the fridge. I've talked about these before, but I still rate them so highly. We're now going to wire in the downlights at the back. So I've wired in the front ones already, so we'll show those in a minute. So I thought I'd show you how we've wired them because we're running them on a single circuit. So at the back we've only got the 2 lights. At the front we had 4. But everywhere that we had a light, we just loop down and then continue the cable run till you get to the end one. So here we only have the 2, so we've just got the end one. And then all we're doing here is cutting this. So this one doesn't matter which one the battery comes from or not, because we're just gonna join it back up. So now now all we're doing is rewiring the negative side up, and then we'll give that a solder. And we're just popping some heat shrink over this. So all we're doing is just basically tapping the light into that cable run that we had. So this one was pretty simple, so I just soldered it in. Oh, so satisfying. Now I'm going to wire in the switch for the downlight. I've already wired the bathroom light and exhaust fan into this switch panel. And same like the other switches, I've just got a loop of cable that runs from the battery via this point and then up to where the downlights are. Same thing again, I've wired in which side the battery's coming to and which side's going to the lights. So we're going to cut these. So these switches are slightly different. As they've got 3 pins, they're still just an on-off switch, but the difference is they've got a light that lights up when the switch is on. So you've got to wire an earth into those. So I'm just going to wire the earths together, or the negatives.
This is what your camera lady's doing behind the scenes.
Then I'm going to wire a female blade terminal on. It's all ready to go now. So we've got the earth, it joins through, so it comes from the battery. It also continues through to the light, but then we've got a pin there for the switch. We've got the positive from the battery and the positive to the light. So the switches will tell you which goes where. So that's the earth, then the line from the battery clips on there, and the line to the light clips on the middle one. So I've got to just wire that in at the fuse block. I'll do that in a sec. The other thing you can do, depending on the power coming through your cables and how you've got your system set up, for these other 2 lights, I've run one power line in because the fan and the light in the shower draw so little power. That cable's enough, so I've run that in as my power. It jumps in, probably looks a bit confusing here. It jumps in and then it jumps over to power the second switch. And then the same thing, the earth is coming in. So that's the earth there. It's jumping in, but then it's jumping over to the second switch. So there's only one power source powering 2 switches. And then here we've got the line going to the shower. So that's on the shower light. And then we've got a line out going to the shower fan, which is that. All wired in. And we've got lights. So I just need to colour match the screws or cut down the ones to length that it came with. Over here we've got a little USB. So USB-A and USB-C charging. That was just a positive and negative with a couple of those blade connections. And then up here we've got our Sirocco 2 12 volt fan. So it spins around all up and down, tucks out of the way. You can lock it in place. So that's kind of nifty. We can put it there and we can also use it when we're at the table. So pop that out of the way. And then here's our main switch panel. So we've got our interior lights, bench lights. That'll be for a light under the awning. We've got our left alley light and the right one as well. And the reason we went for the switches with the blue light in it, for some of these, you won't really be able to tell in the daytime if they're on or not. And I want to be able to tell. Also like the design. And then the reason that the switches on the utility panel don't have the little light is because a lot of those ones, like the one for the toilet fan, will just be on all the time. Same with the fridge. So when we're sleeping, I didn't want a little light on all the time. Right, well, I'm really pleased with the lights and how they've turned out, and I think that's a wrap for tonight. We've now wrapped up all the cladding for the van, so we didn't end up filming a lot towards the end of that as it became really time critical because we needed to move into this and move out of our house. So we kind of just pushed on and got it done. But it all came out pretty well. A lot of it was really fiddly, a lot with the jigsaw taking pieces in and out. It was also really handy having a table saw to rip down some of the boards for some of those thinner sections we needed. Yeah, we have a couple of tiny little bits to trim off, and I think we might do that in carpet. Haven't fully decided what to do there, but yeah, pretty much everything we clad through here, clad around the rest of the shower, and then at the front of the bed there we just clad that in plywood. We built a little door in here, so that's if we need access to the garage space, but also I didn't really want to lose the functionality of the van to be able to carry long lengths of stuff, so that's why we put the door in. Fire extinguisher and all that's in there. And that's pretty much it with cladding. Yeah, I think it was just, yeah, it was very time consuming and fiddly, but it wasn't particularly challenging, I guess. There was some of the individual boards were a little bit challenging, but for the most part, that went up pretty easily. Yeah, happy to have that behind us.